I started asking them what is it that they feel is very tedious. That means you would want your core engineers to review certain things.
What's the threshold? How do you calculate if this system is even applicable for that kind of data?
If you can fix this, or if you can make this use case work, here is a guy who is willing to take it to the next level.
Hey Deepak, welcome to the Secret Sauce. Glad to have you with us. How are you doing today?
Thanks, Ankit. Doing great. How are you?
I'm doing good as well. Thanks for asking. But yeah, I have been extremely excited to have you here, and finally we got the chance to finally hang out. And I know you have interviewed so many DevRel professionals, and you have been extremely active in the community when it comes to DevRel, community building, especially in B2B. So yeah, we'll love to have your perspective on each of these things. But yeah, to start, could you please tell me about your background, your story, how you got to where you are right now?
So my background is, okay, let's start with this. So I've spent 25 years now in the industry, mostly as a developer. And I started my career as an embedded systems engineer. I used to write device driver long ago. Then I got into security side of things. I worked at a startup called Andiamo, which was acquired by Cisco. So over there, I did a lot of access control, network storage, network switching, mainly from the security angle. And then after Cisco, I joined another startup called Blade, which was acquired by IBM. So I kind of, did some bit of cloud infrastructure work there, and then transited into machine learning and cloud. And after IBM, I founded a company around email security called ClearedIn. We raised a bunch of money, and then almost after 5.5 years, we sold it to Barracuda Networks. That experience of building a startup in email security space, collaboration security space, the problem that I ran into was building a developer relations function. So by the end of our, almost after 5.5 years or 5 years, we decided to build a few APIs. And then, one thing leads to another. All of a sudden, we had 15 APIs. And I wanted to bring in developers to try and use our APIs. And that's when I started building kind of a DevRel program all by myself. And I figured that it is so messed up. It is so hard. And there are so many moving pieces. And there are so many ways in which you can go wrong. So once I sold ClearedIn to Barracuda Networks, I started talking with folks, especially from, most of these cloud infrastructure companies who would always ping me to, hey, can you please try out my product or buy my product? So that was a good time to kind of give them feedback as to, why I did not use their product. And that's how this whole thing started. And these folks with whom I was talking with, they were mainly developer advocates or developer relations managers. And as I gave them feedback, what I realized was these people work very hard. In fact, some of them very clearly told me that, hey, listen, we have so much of work that we don't even get proper sleep at night, right? And so when is this? Which year? So this was in year 2022. So we sold ClearedIn to Barracuda Networks in January of 2022. And around March, April, I started on this mission to understand developer relations because it just intrigued me, right? And it was something like, I'm a developer, and it's how the other world, the business world, is looking at me. So there were a few things which became very clear. One is, as the population of developers was growing, they have become a category in themselves, right? Till they were small, it was a side hack which people would do to engage them, to evangelize to them, or only big companies like Apple or Microsoft kind of companies would do. But with this whole dev tools evolution, currently the market or the number of developers we have is estimated to be around 30 million, right? And they are very influential. They are the ones who are decision makers on all these, 6 figures to gigs. Somebody using MongoDB or Elastic, that decision was not made by some non-technical exec, but it was very much a hardcore engineering decision. So I started talking with these guys because, it seemed like they were trying to sell to a persona like me, and they were just not understanding me. They were offering me all the wrong things. And I just felt, there was this moment where it's like I'm looking in the mirror, right? And then I realized developers are hard people to sell, right? And perhaps because the world doesn't understand them, right? So that's when this whole journey started. And when I looked at the challenges involved, I really got excited and I felt, hey, this is something which is very disorganized. Different people do it in a very different manner. But then there are certain abstracted common themes which everyone should follow. And then I started peeling the onion layer after layer, like, hey, explain me how this works or why you did it this way. And that's when, like in a few months, in a couple of months after, starting these conversations, after maybe talking with around 30, 40 developer relation folks, I felt so compelled that, hey, listen, somebody needs to go do something, right? So I incorporated this company by name DevRelify with a very clear intention that let me create tools by which a non-technical person should be able to engage with technical folks, right? They should have tools to engage, understand, and then upsell to developers, to folks like me. So it's a little of a bold move because I have never worked as a developer relations person. I have never really been on the business side of things, right? And here is something I'm trying to do for, let's say, people who are in the GTM teams for developers, or people who are trying to engage developers and upsell to them. And I'm trying to build a tool for them. So that's how it started. But then very soon, ChatGPT happened, right? And ChatGPT was, more like a wake-up call. Like we knew that we are there, we are close. But when I saw ChatGPT, I was like, wow, I mean, this is it. Like, people have solved it. But then I guess in a few days, we started seeing all the cracks or all the problems that, LLMs have. And I said, okay, you know what? What I was imagining could be done in 5 years, maybe with GPT-3, GPT 3.5, GPT-4, we can do them in like 2 years, right? So one of the first things I did was I rebranded DevRelify as Doc E.ai. And the vision became very clear as to this should be something like DAL-E. Just like with DAL-E, you can give a prompt and create an image. GTM teams must have a tool to quickly write technical documentation matching the intent of the developers they are engaging with. So Doc E got inspired from ability to write technical documentation just on a prompt with your knowledge, with your company's way of looking at things. So as I was talking with, more and more developer relation folks, number one problem they all struggle with is content, right? Ability to come up with right content quickly and just keep on iterating, right? You got to write developer guides, integration guides, blogs. I mean, just think of engagement, anything and everything you would need to create awareness and engage the other guy. And you should have a very tight feedback loop, right? You just can't keep throwing content at them, right? You put out some content and then you just see what's the engagement type. And then you, again, like next day you change, you evolve, you twist, you turn, right? Till you have found a very good match. So my insight was it starts with content, which should match intent of the target audience. Then very soon it becomes support. Because once people start taking interest in your tech, your content, right, they'll ask all sort of questions. And you got to be ready to impress them with your new way of looking at the world. Because they can do Google search and they can find the old way of doing stuff. But they can only hear the new way from you or from your company, from your R&D staff. So you need to support them, at the same time educate them. So education is something which you're doing from content, but also from support. And when you're doing support, one of the biggest challenges folks ran into is people would often ask them questions which is out of syllabus. It's like they come to you talking about your data store, and then very soon they'll ask you something about Kubernetes, something about React.js, right? And you can't let them go, right? So you need to arm your developer relations team with technical experts who can really help answer those questions, because that's the way you can impress and really reach their heart, right? Gain that trust and respect. So the next finding was what you have started as engagement should lead to insight. You must look at all those hundreds of questions which all these random developers are asking, and then get this overall picture that, yes, you know what? This is what the market is saying. This is what the community is saying, right? It starts as individual, but then after some point, there has to be some level of abstraction, right? And once you have understood that, only and only then, and I mean, to bring a developer to that level, you need to offer them some free tools, some free software, right? Something that they can play with over the weekend, something that they can just quickly try and do some hello world. But once you have drawn them in, the next most important thing is enabling your go-to-market teams, your sales team, to upsell them. And what I have found is companies succeed in phase one, like just attracting and creating a big community, but then they miserably fail at getting the right insights. It's very easy to get misled. You can see some noise and you can pick a very wrong problem to fix. So step one, engage, right? Content, support, educate. But then very soon, insights, right? What is it that they deeply care and they'll pay for? It's very hard, at times uncomfortable, but you got to do that, right? And then ensure your business folks have something to, talk about or talk to, essentially leads, right? And explore this whole opportunity to convert those users into paying customers. And it is this feedback loop which, experienced folks with great intuition are able to do and able to adapt. But what I'm finding is a lot of people, they are not able to really get this whole feedback loop more as a flywheel, operate and then grow their business. So this is what, I talked and I figured and I got excited, and slowly, step by step, I'm trying to understand and build something which can help executives who are operating developer relations function to, engage, understand, and then upsell.
Interesting. So one thing that I hear time and again is developers don't like getting sold to, developers don't like upselling, right, and marketing. So what do you think about this? Like when you say you have to find a way to upsell developers, what exactly were you referring to? And how do you do it?
So I'll tell you this. People want to buy things only and only if they are sure this is going to help me. Okay? So think of it like this. Engineers are also your normal consumer, right? We also go to Walmart and Best Buy and Amazon, right? We do shop there, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when we are coding, we have a deadline. And often you will find, I would vouch for this out of my 25 years of experience, we are always running late, right? Every software product that is released, if you really see during release time, there were so many defects which were there, but then we decided, hey, listen, we're going to release note this and get this product out. Okay? Because there are so many things which can go wrong. There are so many unexpected things which can happen, right? Things have become much more stable than they were, let's say, 20 years back. It's still even today, right? Even simple pushing your code, deploying your code. There's so many things which can go wrong, right? So what I am seeing is people love to buy stuff, or developers love to buy stuff, but only and only when they are 100% sure that this is not going to hurt them. They are not getting into something where you have been promised one thing and it doesn't work. Okay? And it has happened a lot. In fact, the easiest example I can give you is think of data stores. Okay? Every web application will have at least one data store, right? When they start, they try their best to bring in a data store which will really work with them, work for their workload, use case, and the kind of applications they want to build. Now, what happens is, as you know, or you discover more use cases from your customers, your workload changes. And your data store choice, which was the right choice when you started, right? Slowly it becomes untenable. You have so much of technical debt that very soon you will have a second data store, a third data store, and then you would have your own, like managing 3 data stores. You will need to have 3 experts or database administrators, right, who really know those individuals, then synchronizing them, bringing it all together. Then you come up with a new architecture and maybe you throw away 2 of them, bring in a 4th one, right? And this is an ongoing struggle. So developers often feel that they are standing on something, on foundation which is not rock solid stable. Things are always changing. They're in a flux, right? And you got to migrate, right? You got to take your stuff which was built for, let's say, 100 users to 1,000 users to 10,000 users and then 100,000 and then 1 million users. And making that transition is painful, right? So what I have seen developers really do is they don't listen to what companies are saying. They rather listen to their peers. I would attach 100 times more importance to a blog from Airbnb, Netflix, Walmart, right?
Mm-hmm.
The engineering blog, than, let's say, a presentation from MongoDB or Elastic or whatever. Any company for that, right? And I see them, and maybe if I can talk to them, and that's why Bay Area is such an awesome place, go have beer with them and just discuss your problems, right? And once they tell me that, boss, it works for me, that's it. I am all sold. I'm going to go, whatever, pick the right data store which I feel meets my workload. And that's a big business thing that I'm going to go buy, right? So yeah, that's how I have figured developers work. So the GTM team needs to understand this, and that's why they need to first engage, then understand, and then upsell.
So for developer tools, as well as technologies like in the ecosystem, like AI technologies, database systems, right? Even these are, you could argue, most of the times sort of developer tools consumed through API or via some other, or via some other service, right? In some other way. But at the end of the day, I mean, I can't even think of anything except API these days. Or maybe like you have this managed service that can be deployed on-prem. But anyways, coming back to the topic, it's more and more moving towards developers. Somehow, like developers having more veto power in the buying decision, right? Or in some way, developers coming in the equation to set things up into their existing systems or code bases, right? So you are basically saying developers have a lot of veto power, even if the executives are making decisions a lot of times. You're probably hinting towards the fact that they will consult the actual developer in their team. Or maybe they were once a developer, and then because they have that perspective and, technical sense, they would be able to like either themselves evaluate or get a sense from their team who is actually involved in the actual implementation or whatever. So is it what you're observing, or is there some things you would like to add or change in what I've just said?
No, completely agree. In fact, you know what? Think of it like this. If tomorrow, for whatever reason, your service goes down, right? Who are you going to go after? Who is it who will bring it up? It's not the exec, right? It's that technical lead or your architect, right? So if you didn't listen to your architect or your technical lead and you bought a service and that service went down, right? That's it. There is no onus, there is no involvement, there is no commitment from that technical lead, right? So yes, absolutely. And I think execs are very smart in this because they do not understand all the nuances involved. I mean, I'll give you another example. When I was evaluating data stores or ClearedIn, we had to try out a lot of performance workload just to see how would, let's say, Neo4j or let's say Cassandra or DataStax would behave under this kind of a read-write condition, right? Now, none of these companies, they really on their own share those details. They leave it up to you. It's like you go and figure out, right? Now, just imagine a world. I mean, I know there are, especially on database side, there are a lot of good performance reports which have started coming in and we look at them. But imagine this, if different companies could just share performance numbers along with their API reference manual, right? Like this is how we perform. Being very transparent. That would facilitate, speed up the decision making so much, right? At least we can trust in that, yes, this is what I'm getting into. This is the bargain here, right? Like this is the cost and this is the performance I get, right? It's just that they kind of hide it, or perhaps they just want you to try out and just, take a guess and bet. And that's the reason developers do not trust vendors as much, right? They want to try it out themselves. They want to put it through their own workload and then make a choice, because they know once they have made the choice and if things break, which they will break, the onus is on them. They own it. It's their baby, right? So that's the reason, the world is the way it is today.
Interesting. Yeah. So when you said upselling, you actually meant developers are looking for making their life easier, and then having that process become easy for developers to be able to make their life easier is what you were referring to as some sort of upselling, right? Like
absolutely.
You were basically
an example. Let me give you an example. So we were using MongoDB Enterprise. Okay. We wanted to build some kind of instrumentation, some kind of, read-write profiling, visualization, and, like the performance. We were seeing some random glitches happen. So we did a comparison. How much time would it take if we were to build this feature on our own, right? And then MongoDB folks came and said, hey, listen, we can turn on, try it out. If you like it, use it. Else, if you don't find the things you're looking for, be my guest, please build it yourself, right? So in the trade-off, I could clearly see, right, the time it takes, the energy it takes, the resources it takes, and here's the offer. As long as that arbitrage makes sense, absolutely. I mean, that's how people, are buying software. So yeah, that's what developers generally do.
Awesome. So what is the framework that so after talking to so many DevRel folks, like what do you think is the framework that should be adopted, or what are some of the ways to go about selling, or rather like facilitate developers using the technology properly, or what are the ways of marketing to developers, or rather, like, let's just not get into the wordplay, or rather just say that, like, what are the ways that we can have for making it easy for developers to discover the technology that we are building, right? And then be able to, like, trust it and then credibly vouch for it to their peers and managers, and then say that, yeah, this is what I want to use. So how have you seen this? How have you seen developer relations folks and yourself to, like, create the mechanism to be able to do this properly?
So the top 5 things that I learned, and I didn't know them before, having those conversations. Number 1, developer relations experts should be only brought when certain criteria are resolved. Okay? Number 1 is you must have some traction. Do not expect, like, so here's how it starts. When the company is formed, you have, let's say, 7 or 8, maybe 10 folks who are working in a very closed group, and they have some intuition, some signal. They have talked with, let's say, 5 guys, right? And they have started working on it. The practice which often happens, and which is a wrong practice, is that when these guys, like this R&D team, literally, right, may have one business guy or half a business guy, is a quarter away from the release, then they just go and hire a DevRel title person, like a developer advocate or whatever, developer evangelist, right? They have not yet proven traction or even the first signals of product market fit. Okay? They have not really done the grudge work of product management, which is essentially, talking to your potential customers and ensuring that at least, 80% of what the product offers matches with, doing proper discovery, very methodical, data-driven discovery. Okay? And this is mainly forced by VCs. VCs, somehow they have this notion in their head that, okay, if you're a DevTools startup and you are 1 quarter away from your release, just go hire a bunch of smart developer advocates or developer evangelists, and they'll come and solve all your problems, right? It's expecting too much from them, right? So what I heard loud and clear from these 100+ conversations that I have had so far is, do not rush into bringing in a developer relations person, because you will have unrealistic expectations which they'll not be able to deliver. Okay? Founders will have to do initial legwork more than they are expecting. So I have heard few senior developer relations execs say that I will not join a company if they do not have a product guy and a marketing guy, because they insist you must have a product guy and a marketing guy, right? Again, it's a thumb rule. It very much depends on the type of product, the type of target developers you have in mind. But in general, having a product manager, a full-time product manager, or at least having a full-time marketing person ensures that they have taken care of the basic needs of, discovering the product features and ensuring there is some level of traction and the messaging and positioning is there. Okay? Their ideal stage is that once you have raised seed round, and you have at least 10 customers, okay, and maybe a community of, let's say, 200, it's only then that you should bring in these people. You can give them a fancy title, but the role you should assign them is be this link. Like, okay, here is a group, which is, let's say, at least 200, where you are trying to engage them, trying to understand them, and then expand that number from 200 to 500 and to 1,000. Okay? If you only have 10 members in your community, expecting developer relations to grow that, for some it may work, but most likely it will fail.
I see. So I think a lot of founders do hire DevRel thinking that they have a very technical product and business folks or marketing folks are not going to be able to convey this to their audience, which at that point might not even exist. But still, the idea that a developer relations specialist would come in, a developer advocate would be able to like talk about their product in the right way or create content in specific formats and in specific tone, right? And that deeply technical content might not be feasible for a marketing person to produce, right? So for that reason, a lot of people, I think, they bring in instead of technical writers, a developer evangelist or a developer advocate, right? And I think so. In that sense, this role starts from like some sort of content generator, content producer who churns out a lot of like technical content and then at some point start reaching out to folks using that content, right? And then that process gets enhanced. That process gets more broader and broader, right? And then at some point they try to amass an audience and then turn it into an engaged community. But from the looks of it, what you're trying to convey is maybe these founders might not even have a product market fit. So they might first think about that because they might not even be producing the content that is worth producing because there's like a change in the product itself that will like automatically ruin the content. I mean, devalue the content, right? So I understand that, but still I want to, so you're basically saying, but what is a product market fit? Like at what point, I think you briefly mentioned that if there's some sort of customers or even like third-party developers using your product, right? And then they give you some good feedback, then you can maybe consider that a product market fit. So I just wanted to understand, how to get this product market fit.
So product market fit in my mind, again, I'm picking from something I learned from Mohit Aron, the founder CEO of Cohesity. He has a very nice, straightforward, a litmus test of product market fit. If your average salesman, without involving the exec team, is able to close a deal, that means you have product market fit. If you are not pushing the product, the buyer on its own, right, is able to just come and pick, buy, and just walk away, right? That's product market fit. But let me take a step back because as you were mentioning about content, I'll tell you something, and again, this is my story. So 5 years back when I was at ClearedIn, mainly looking, product and engineering part of ClearedIn, I thought I knew how to blog and how to connect. Now, here's the problem. The problem is, as engineers, we love talking in PhD-like English. Okay, we read a lot of research papers, and we love to talk in those kind of words and sentences. Now, the problem is when you're talking to the market, you got to be talking in grade 8 English. Okay? And I learned that the hard way. Like I would write a blog And then my marketing guy would come and just kind of simplify it. And I'm talking like, 5 years back, the pre-chat GPT days, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the challenge for engineers is, if you talk that same language to your engineers, they'll not respect you, man. They'll feel, oh man, this dude is just talking superficial words. He doesn't know what he's dealing with, right? Because
Mhm.
you're talking with your data scientists and your architects and your engineers, you got to talk in their language, which is, complex, technical, and articulated in a way which really conveys the nuances of, trade-off involved, right? Whereas when you're talking to the market, your English has to be totally different. And I learned that a hard way. I mean, it's like, I joke this, I learned at the age of 40 how to write in grade 8 English, right? So that's one lesson that I have learned. And I think folks who are really successful over a period of time, they do this effortlessly, right? When they talk to the data scientists, they talk in their jargon. When they talk to non-technical folks, they talk in their jargon, right? I think I have learned it, not yet perfected it, but I'm still learning. But coming back to the other point, I think what you were really asking is, how do you get this initial traction going on, right? And that's the
Uh,
sorry.
Initial track. Yeah, I mean, at what's like, I was trying to understand. Yeah. Basically, where does DevRel come in according to your experiences? What do you think is the right point at which you should appoint the DevRel? Yeah, that was what I was trying to understand.
So 2-3 things matter. Number one is the product. What's the product you have, and how complicated is using it? What does it take to use that product? How much of developer involvement is needed? That's number one. Number two is the founding team. Founding team, they have their own mix of talent, right? There are some engineers who are really good at articulating and presenting and able to convince, whereas there are others who love coding, but they don't love talking to other folks about it, right? So depends on your product, depends on your team, and finally it depends on the persona, the target persona you have. So let's say if you have an AI ML product and you are targeting data scientists, your English has to be different. You just cannot use the English of, let's say, English fictions to try and tell them, oh, AI, ML, and deep learning, and just throw in words just randomly like that, right? You got to talk statistics, right? Those very detailed, things which make sense to them. So, assuming all these things in place, the founding team owns bringing in at least 2 to 3 customers. They need to own this initial go-to-market motion, right? And this is just a handful, but they need to do that hard work. At least create a semblance that here is a repeatable motion. Here is something which, if I had a version or a clone of me, can keep on doing this again and again. And that's the thing which any new hire developer evangelist, developer advocate, DevRel person looks for. Like, give me some semblance of a playbook to begin with. And then they will take this and run. But you need to provide them. Like, the founders owe this to this new hire. That's why, as I mentioned, they look for somebody who owns product in a dedicated manner, not in a part-time manner, or somebody who is doing some demand gen activity, right? It could be a dedicated person, or maybe it's divided among 2-3 founders and they are sharing that responsibility. But until and unless you have something done, at least, let's say 2 to 3 quarters of blogging and, creating awareness and, doing some YouTube content, blog post, podcasts, right? Until and unless that is done, some legwork is done, you can't really expect a DevRel person to come and then become an expert, a domain authority in that technology, because just a few weeks back, he was known for a totally different kind of a thing. Right? That person would not have that kind of a respect which the founder would have. right? So founders owe this to developer advocates that maybe after 1 or 2 quarters, they should have some semblance of something which is working, more like you got a bicycle which you can pedal, and then hand it over to that guy and ask him to convert that bicycle into a motorcycle, right? So a DevRel person, in simpler words, is more like that engine getting into your cycle to convert it into a motorcycle. But the developers or the founders need to give that cycle. They can't avoid that cycle.
Great. These are some great points, some fantastic things to say about developer relations. I agree. But just wanted to take a step back and understand. See, developer relations is also a very ambiguous term. People have different expectations from this role. Some people are probably focusing it on product development, maybe, where they want their product to evolve in the right direction, and they think a developer feedback is extremely necessary, and this person will come in and provide that pipeline, right? Establish things, pipelines to have that feedback being streamlined. And then some people might think as like just that awareness play, right? That might be very significant for them, and they want somebody who is a rock star, just goes out, speaks about the product, brings in a lot of developers. Or somebody might be thinking more holistically, and then they want some senior guy who understands this whole marketing engine focused on developers and who wants to create a big ecosystem of developers using their product or service. And then they want this guy, this senior leader, to like strategically form this function from ground up in a way that he can not only just act as an individual contributor, but can scale it right into a bigger team of developer relations folks who reports to him. So I don't know, like I've seen a bunch of these lines of thought when it comes to developer relations. But most commonly, I've seen a solo, in the startup world, I've seen only a solo developer advocate trying to like do a lot of these activities himself with the aim of increasing awareness, right? So that's the most common setting that I've seen this function into. But then, having said all that, like I just wanted to ask you, like, how are you perceiving this? Is it on the same line of thought or something different?
So what I am seeing is that, yes, there are these rock star developer relations folks who have huge followings on Twitter and LinkedIn, and where their videos have a lot of likes. What I am seeing is their popularity does not really translate into success of you building that relationship.
Mm-hmm.
So people can think of this as a shortcut to success, but I am not really seeing it work in that way. Okay? You can think of an instant fix, but it doesn't really fix in the long term. Because in the long term, what I'm seeing happen again and again is until and unless you are really, really solving a problem which really matters, your product will not have traction. As simple. You can hire a rock star. Maybe for a few weeks, you can get huge amount of traffic, right? But it will not translate into sales. At the end of the day, right, an organization, a for-profit organization needs to bring in money. You need to create value which people are willing to pay for. So you can create this, jazz and razzle dazzle and, things with a rock star DevRel. In long term, it doesn't work. Number two, yes, there are folks with different background who have come into developer relations, right? People who started as engineers and they were good at communicating, they were good at presentation and connecting with other engineers. They transitioned into developer relations role, mainly as developer advocate. And I have found them to be most successful. Also, I have found non-technical people come in developer relations role, especially for products which are not deep technical. Like, they are like you're essentially trying to just sell an API, not anything beyond an API, right? So far, they are mainly very good at, maintaining that relationship. It's like, wishing them on birthday and being very nice and, just being a nice person, kind of giving them hugs kind of a thing. And that also works because they convey the warmth and the care a company has for its developers, right? It's the third category, which again, I have found to be very effective. They are folks who have product marketing background, right? They don't go very technical, but what they are able to figure out are the new markets. They are able to give you insights more around product discovery, right? And again, they are fewer in numbers, but for some cases, I've seen them to be super effective. Like they really help the company evolve into something which they had not even imagined, right? So with this background in mind, one of the first thing I used to ask all these interviews that I used to conduct is, hey, tell me where should DevRel belong? Product, marketing, engineering, or something on its own. And what I have seen is for a startup in the initial days where you don't really have much adoption, I think product manager is the closest buddy a developer advocate can have. He may report to anyone, right? In a startup, it doesn't matter, but it's the product adoption which really, really, really matters, right? And in the initial days, even if you go and try and create a lot of buzz around, doing awareness activities, until and unless there are few people who really vouch for it, who really look forward to it, there is no benefit in trying to amplify that message. Because if you can't convince 5 people, how would you convince 5,000, right? So having relationship with that 5 gives you clue that what should I say that will attract the next 500 or 5,000, right? So in the initial days of a startup, developer relations need to work very closely with product. Okay. Once you have seen, let's say, some green shoots, right? Yes, if I say this in 5 to 7 touch points, right, with these kind of contents, I am able to bring in a developer to join my community, try out my product, activate, may not be pay, but at least use it on a regular basis, right? That's a good enough signal that now your product is matured. There are few people who are coming and using it, and perhaps they are loving it, but you're not sure. Now is the time you have to shift gears and do more of marketing kind of awareness activities, outreach activities, right? That you have some sample to prove that, yes, there are these 10 guys who are on a daily basis or on a weekly basis coming and using the service, right? And it's over here with marketing, because one of the slogans that I have heard about marketing, that with marketing, the challenge is for any successful marketing, the secret is infinite budget. Okay. And then in marketing, there is one half which never works. It's just that you don't know it's which half. Okay. So especially as a technical person trying to do marketing, I have personally faced this situation that you will keep on throwing money, right, at creating some fancy video, getting some blog post, bringing in some celebrity as a guest, whatever. Like you can think of 20 things, right, you can do, but you don't know what's really working and what is not working. It's very hard. There is something which is working because, your adoption and your traction and your revenues are growing, but it's just that it's hard to really figure out. But yes, once you even have an inkling that, okay, out of these 10, this is the most likely thing which is working, you just double down, triple down, see, and if in a quarter or two it grows, great. Again, if it, let's say, stutters after 1 or 2 quarters, which again, switch over, shift to something else. So you got to keep on experimenting, right? Nobody has the answer, neither I nor anybody else, right? So you got to figure it out, and it's an ongoing battle. So that's where I think as the product matures, the company matures, marketing is the natural home for developer relations. And again, when you think of developer relations, I think of them more like a triangle. A triangle is, on one hand, you have these developer advocates, deeply technical, engaging developers, more like deep technical things. Then you need some kind of community management, which does, upkeep of your community, just, trying to ensure people are being heard, their things are being listened to, and, they receive a welcome, and, you're organizing events, activities to keep them engaged. Not so much technical, but you need them to be there when it's needed. And the third angle is content, right? Content is, again, there is such a wide range of content that you would need, that maybe for a month that content creator can work as your technical writer, right? For the next month could help you with, writing blogs, or, doing some integration guide, listening. But this triumvirate of somebody who is doing evangelism, developer advocacy, somebody who is doing content, technical content, maybe a technical writer, and then a community manager. It is this triangle which really drives this whole developer relations, right? But it should be under guidance of marketing, because marketing folks, they really keep track of ROI. They won't tell the community manager, they won't tell it to other folks, but at the very top, they are very closely watching those metrics, and they are able to, change those gears and ensure resources are poured in the right function.
Interesting. So how do we, see, the thing is, on one side, folks say that marketing is something that doesn't resonate with developers, right? But on the other side, we do have this notion of developer marketing, and marketing being a part of this pipeline that has to come into play within this pipeline as a major part of it, right? So how do you think about this?
So I have debated this with a lot of folks, and here's the understanding I had as of today. And again, as I learn, I'll evolve. So marketing works, right? We are all human beings, right? It's just that you should not market to a developer as you're marketing to a consumer, right? The way you're trying to sell me a toothpaste, please do not try and sell me an API like that.
That's a funny way to say it, but so true. Yeah,
Right?
definitely. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
when I am a developer, I'm that same person. I also buy toothpastes, right? I also look at those ads which have all those, funny things which just change over every year, right? Every year you figure out there is new formula which is going to save you, and you were whatever in a very different zone for that, right? So as a developer, here's the challenge. The challenge is that I need something which will make me look smart, make me deliver higher quality software, give me something which really works. Do not overpromise and underdeliver, right? And I am stuck somewhere because I know I will be, right? There are so many moving pieces in software. Things will not compile, not deploy. It will not, right? The performance will not be up to the mark. So all we expect is that when I am in trouble and I'm asking for help, my house is on fire, please help me, because it's going to happen, right? And that's where I see there are some communities who are awesome. I mean, Stripe, just look at the way they handle developer questions. I mean, they have an awesome practice, right? They have so many questions coming in, but the way, the speed, and the resource that they provide is awesome, right? So it's not only marketing when I am about to make a decision whether to buy this or not, but it's more like engage with me, right? Okay, tell me in very plain, simple, straightforward English what your product does without any jargons, right? Just tell me in a very straightforward manner, which I can take and convey to my team, right? And then help me make that decision. Don't shove it down my throat, right? Because if you try to push it on me, I'll start looking for, reasons why you're doing that. Perhaps I'll find that your product is awesome. I'll end up buying it. But if you're pushing it hard on me, that's counterproductive, right? So developers need marketing because, think of it like this. Had there been no marketing by an awesome product, all of us developers, we would have to live with substandard products, right? So we need marketing. We need the right product to be shown in the right shape, size, and light, in the right color. But don't overdo it, because once we lose, once we feel that, oh yeah, this guy is just bluffing, that's it. All your marketing is gone, right? and the thumb rule that I have is, whenever I find something very shiny, I'm going to go call, like, I have like 10 friends, right, who are my buddies, right? We hang out, we have beer with. I'm going to go call them and ask them, hey, buddy, have you seen this? Have you tried this? And then say, no. And then we try and figure out, okay, is there somebody who has tried this? And then just have a conversation, just like you and me, Ali. Like, hey, how did this work? They are claiming this, right? I mean, there's this awesome software called Make, right? They help you with that lot of, low code automation. It's an awesome product. I saw them, I used them, and I loved it, right? It's just that none of my friends had used it. So once I used it and I loved it, I went and I told them that, hey, buddy, don't do all these, things. Just use Make. And they have a pretty generous free tier you can try out. And now I have become advertiser. Make hasn't paid me any money, but I love their product so much that I am going and asking my friends that, hey, try this product out. This is super awesome, right? So at some level, that marketing has worked, right? Whatever the folks at Make did, it impacted me, and I felt so compelled that I went and I told 5 of my friends. So it works, but you got to do it in the right way.
Yep, no, 100% agree. Yeah, developers are not aliens. They're human beings as well. And so I think we covered a lot of amazing things about developer marketing versus developer relations, some subtle nuances, right? And then your background, your experiences. I think this time we could start with some things around like your interviews with these folks and some takeaways from those interviews. And yeah, so let's start somewhere around that.
As I said, it all started in a manner like a lot of these folks, when I was running my last startup, they had pinged me and they had, requested me to try out their product and give them feedback. I didn't get much time then, but once I had sold ClearedIn to Barracuda Networks, then I had some time and some interest, like, hey, let me understand the other side of the fence. And that's when I started, engaging with them, asking them that, hey, tell me your life. Tell me how you guys are doing developer relations. And so at this point in time, I think I must have talked with something like 128 or so folks in different functions of developer relations or developer marketing, right? And there were a few things which came out very clear, very prominent. Number one was that it is disorganized. And the very symptom of that is every person who gets into a developer advocacy role, the first thing that person does within like a quarter of joining that role is to write a blog like, what is developer relations and what is developer advocacy for me? So number one, it is disorganized. Number two, it is very, very product and stage dependent. It just evolves. And it's all, I think, about, well, growth hacking, but in another way, not in a traditional sense. But the end goal is growth. And the steps are, how do I understand my developer? Understand his need, his pain, his aspirations, and what is it that they really, really want, right? And very soon, what I realized is the context is many a times you have, some engineers who are very good with like words, right? It's a very smooth transition for them. But then people try to bring in a product guy or a marketing guy and have them run this show. So a product guy is very suitable for doing validation kind of work. But then he or she may not be very patient with building relationship or providing support. And If you have a marketing guy, they are very good at building relationship. They are very good at, understanding the other side and offering content which resonates. But then they need a lot of help. They'll come back to their engineering team to ensure that the answer he or she is sending out is accurate, right? So I saw this whole mix of things. The other thing I realized that during COVID, there was so much of demand for developer relations professionals that companies hired a lot of low technical skilled person into this role, just because there was so much of demand that you have to bring in bodies, right? So these folks, it was a decent amount of learning curve for them. One thing, when I was interacting with all these folks, became very clear is that there is a lot of legwork needed on both the sides of fence. So they are more like a gateway between this external community of developers, and then there is a small team of developers inside the company, right? And as a gateway, they have to take message from the R&D team and float the trial balloons in the community and just see what's getting traction, what's getting response, right? And then once they start talking and engaging, distill that information, right? You talked with 100 folks. You can't repeat everything to all your engineers. Distill it in a way that, you are giving a summary in a way that explains why certain things should be done, number 1, number 2, number 3. And what I heard again and again from these folks is there is a lot of work. Folks were not getting enough sleep. They were traveling. They were going to events, right? There was a lot of work. And I started asking them that, hey, tell me more about your internal engineering team. Who was really supportive of you? Where were you really having friction? So one thing which became very clear is, as companies build product, the R&D folks, they can help you on engineering level only to a certain extent. If you try and ping them a lot, request them to help you with even simple things, right? Or let's say from an engineer's point of view, simple things, they get irritated. They'll not help. So that's one of the causes of delay. That means you would want your core engineers to review certain things, and they have other pressing things they have committed for, and you would not get help on time, right? So what I understood upon digging deeper is that in any organization, especially R&D, product, software organizations, there are only few key documents which contain the core knowledge of a company. I would say in single digit, like within 10, okay? Hardly 5 or 6 documents in any company which contains the core knowledge, right? So the people who write it are essentially your first product manager or mostly the R&D team, right? Now, everybody else, be it marketing, product, or your developer relations, all they are doing are translating that core key knowledge into something which is more palatable to this audience, right? So what I realized, or the insight that I gathered, is that there is a lot of knowledge which is tribal, which is not documented. Something which is distilled and refined, only that is documented. Okay? And what has been documented by the internal R&D team, your developer relations, marketing, or product folks, they essentially translate that in, depending on the context and the audience you have, right? They don't really add a lot of knowledge. They bring feedback, but they are not adding knowledge. So that was one of the key insights, right? That there are only a few documents which key people kind of, put together. A. B. There is a lot which is still tribal in mind and in conversation channels, not really documented, right? And third, it's disorganized and it remains disorganized for a pretty long time. Because if you think at the beginning, the focus is essentially to get adoption and traction, and then it's to provide support, and then more and more content, right? So you may have marketing folks own the content piece. If there is a sales organization, they may hold the support thing. If there is a strong product leader, maybe they may want to hold the adoption piece, as in the product interaction piece, right? And they may want validation. So with these insights, I started asking them, what is it that they feel is very tedious? Tedious as in, I know how to do it, it's just that I don't have time. And what my realization was that having these small documents, it's like, getting you an integration guide for this unique platform. Okay. So you already have, let's say, 10 integration guides. And then you want it for the 11th one and 12th one. And it's not a lot of work, but still somebody has to do it, right? And it takes time. And you got to write it in the tone and voice of your company, right? You got to maintain a certain standard. Now, this is something which just takes much longer than what people give it for, right? Number one. Number two, there is a randomness in community. Okay? The person joining your community can have a wide variety of questions. And to assume that they are only and only going to ask about your product and your feature is a wrong expectation, right? So number one, again, in community, the questions are big and vague. A lot of times the ask is not very clear, and there is a ping pong which is needed, like, hey, can you tell me this, can you tell me this? And only after you have exchanged 5 messages, you understand, okay, this is what is the real information this guy wants, right? And this is what makes it very time consuming. And if there are multiple such threads going on, you got to switch your context, makes it harder. So the problem starts with content, right? And again, these content, I would not call them like very different or delta wise, a very different knowledge, but it's the same knowledge in a different form factor. And then support, again, it's varied. Most of the time, essentially in the initial phase, the support questions are very surface level. Like, can you do this? Can you just tell me this? Only and only when you say something, then they start asking you questions which do not pertain to your product. And now the challenge becomes, this developer relations person or support engineer at the end of the day can only learn so much, right? He or she cannot know it all, right? And that's where a lot of time is invested. And what really gets neglected in this whole thing is the advocacy piece. That means after talking to or interacting with like dozens of engineers, you got to give some feedback to your product team. And that somehow gets messed up. It's like you just remember the last conversation you had. You would forget what you talked last week or the week before that. And then it becomes very hard, and it's very intuition based, like, what recommendation you will give. So these were the main things as I talked with more than 100 professionals. I kind of uncovered that these are the problems which folks are really, really struggling with.
So almost all the pieces are clear, but the thing that I have somewhat hard of a time understanding is this last piece where the product feedback is getting lost in this process of having a lot of conversations and a lot of to and fro in the midst of engaging the community, right? So for example, like in my case, if I'm interacting with a lot of people right after the meeting, I would jot it down on a piece of paper, just because I know exactly that it's not going to be lasting for a long time in the memory. As time progresses, some amount of it will be lost, right? So I'll keep losing some amount of it as the time progresses. So that's why I immediately tend to write these things off. Same for the community. Like if there's something interesting that I cannot answer, I just tell them, hey, I'll be back with an answer, or I delegate it to some engineer or some researcher or some other stakeholder who's relevant to answer that kind of a question, right? So, I mean, it seems pretty straightforward to me, but yeah, that's why I probably am missing some point. And
when you're interacting with somebody in the community, do you ask them what project they have, what kind of scale they are thinking, which company they are from?
Not necessarily, right? Like, why would I bring such a thing in the middle of some conversation, right? It's gonna just break the flow. So,
correct. So, I mean, so that is one of the challenges, right? So think of it like this. You may have somebody fresh out of college just tinkering with something, right? And he or she may have some doubt, some question here, there. And then there is this senior architect or whatever, some serious dude who is trying to solve a problem, looking for some solution, and is also in your community, right? So it'll be very hard, because if you try and give them equal weightage, perhaps you are missing some, like key insight, right? So statistically, you can, just summarize and say, all right, I talked with, 48 folks, and 20 of them said this, and 5 said this, and 2 said this. But a smart developer evangelist would essentially give a list to their product engineering team, let's say once a week or once in 2 weeks, like, hey, I talked with these set of people with this information only, right? Here is what I think is closest to the roadmap, right? Or something that we should even think of doing, right? So bringing in that extra bit because there are a lot of problems in the world, right? Nobody's going to solve all of them, right? So because the problem that product engineering teams have is that they already have a long list of tasks, right? The decision they have to make is, all right, is this something I should, like bring into my priority list and do something such that I can go win a customer? So a smart developer relations person will help the product engineering answer this question: what should you fix next? Because there are a lot of defects, there are a lot of features in the roadmap. And the insight they bring, the smart ones, is if you can fix this, or if you can make this use case work, here is a guy who is willing to, take it to the next level. Right? That is something which makes or breaks, startups.
Right? Yeah, makes sense. So community game is a patience play, right? Like, so yeah, I understand. So what you're essentially trying to say is a lot of people, they don't understand if answering this community at this point makes sense, because they don't know who is asking the question and how relevant that person is for the growth of the company and for investing that kind of a time from an engineer, right? So this is why, like, essentially when I talk about community to the leadership and the whole team as such, I try to navigate it in a very educational manner, where I tell them that community play is a play of patience and requires a lot of investment for a long extended period of time without probably much ROI visibly coming along in short term, right? So this is another thing. Like, you want, like, a smart DevRel would want to, like, make sure even before joining the company that the company has conviction in this kind of a play, right? Because if they do not, then it's probably going to be a hard time for him or her in the future. Even if there is conviction, how much is there? And then gauging what kind of conviction is there from the kind of investment they're trying to make, both in terms of the buy-ins, the finance part of it, but also in terms of the engineering, the product, and the research time, right? Like people time that they're willing to give into this, right? So I think this is how I typically go about solving this problem. Like, I make it extremely clear that engaging a community is going to be a hard thing and requires a lot of patience and commitment. without seeing much in return, at least in the 30, 60, 90 days. You won't see much traction coming in, and you would have to be kind of selfless to an extent. But what else? Like, do you think, was there some potential solutions that you got from all those 128 plus folks you have spoken to?
Right. So as I heard their problem, few things became very clear, right? One is with generative AI. Now it is very easy to create content, right?
Mm-hmm.
With the biggest downside that the content, little bit of it may be incorrect, right? So what we decided with Doc E is that we will help you convert tribal knowledge into some useful content, right? Because one of the problems with LLM is it's a chicken and a egg problem. You need more content to train your model, to build your RAG in order to generate even more document, right? So you must have a minimum, quorum of documents, even kickstart this whole content generation process. So a lot of companies which are, let's say, don't really have a very dedicated team of, let's say, half a dozen technical writers. To start with, they will not have documents enough to even get a RAG solution up and running for them. Okay. So what we thought is that, okay, for those people, they have their knowledges trapped in all these Slack channels and Microsoft Team and emails, right? If we could give them a way to create something useful, A, and then B, have a workflow where that knowledge can be reviewed. Because we assume the worst. We assume that it's going to hallucinate and it's going to contain something which is like whatever, incorrect, like 5% incorrect. So make it very easy for people to review and approve, right? So if you could get that workflow going, then at least you have built some kind of a knowledge base. You have put a RAG with LLM, or you have something to train upon, right? So that's what we figured out as the first piece of puzzle, mainly for a little smaller or little up till mid-sized company. The next thing, which is again relatively easy to do, and I see there are a lot of vendors doing that, is once you have content, once you have decent amount of technical documentation, you can take that and quickly convert that knowledge in a different form factor. Like I can quickly create an integration guide, a developer guide, whatever. Like you can just think of things. It's just that you're not creating anything new. It's just you're repackaging that same knowledge. Next place where, again, there are a few vendors, especially after ChatGPT, is answering questions. And there too, the challenge which is there today is in any SaaS or software company, net new knowledge is created on a weekly or quarterly or monthly basis, right? So the challenge is you have something out there which is old and most probably incorrect, stale. And there is no perfect mechanism to keep on refreshing that. So the downside of that is if you do RAG in a wrong manner, your answers will be retrieved from older documents. Okay. And you will end up giving answer which is incorrect. And you will have all the references, because if you click on the references, the documents will show that yes, the answer, whatever numbers you show to the customer is there in the link, but it's just that it's outdated, it's stale. So the biggest challenge is how do you continuously learn and continuously update? That loop has to be so tight that you cannot even wait for your technical writers to essentially, take a month to come up with those documentation and then you index it in your RAG and, do the follow-up. It's like, I'm having a release in couple weeks. Here is the new knowledge or here is the new fix. And I want this knowledge to be available like the day my product is GA or this feature is released. So we focused on that. And what we did was we came up with an access control mechanism where you can think of two workspaces. There is a workspace where knowledge is created, and then there is a workspace where knowledge is served. So you can assign or you can give us access to a certain channel and say, all right, this is my new knowledge. Just put it in that channel. Okay. It doesn't have to be in any perfect documentation form. And then the moment you release your product, we start serving that knowledge. So if you ask us that question, we'll instantly update the way we answer it. So what that helps you with is having support which is very, very in sync with the current, latest, and the best product documentation, right? Without really, we call it documentation tax. So another funny thing is, think about it. Companies, they spend a lot of money at creating documentation. But the moment you create more documentation, you have increased the work of an engineer consuming your documentation. So earlier, that engineer would have taken, let's say, 15 minutes to get to the knowledge and then go back to his work and implement. But if you have just added, let's say, 1,000 pages of documentation, now that person will be investing like 2-3 hours just to reach to that paragraph that he was looking for, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you have spent more money, you have increased more work for your developer, and both of you, one person is losing money and the other person is losing time, right? So writing more documentation is something you should be very careful about, right? So try and not do it if possible, but if you have to do it in a way that it should not burden your consumers, your developers, right? So coming back to point, content, then support. But the main feature which I felt there is no tool today is this advocacy piece. That is, how do I do justice with 1,000 conversations, right? You can make all those notes, right? It will take you only so far. Let's say you can remember like last 10 conversations, right? But beyond 10, you need a data-driven way to really, aggregate that insight. And then backed with data, you should be able to say that, okay, if you can do this, here is a group of people. I can go back and say, hey, listen, you were looking for this new shiny feature. Here is something I have. Why don't you try it out or give me feedback or, engage them better, right? So that is something we really focused on. And the way we explain it to our customers is we will help you understand the gaps in your product and or documentation just by looking at your community questions. Because today you have a lot of engines to create documentation, but there is no mechanism to look for gaps in the documentation, right? So we are rather using AI in a inverse way, where we'll look at the questions and then tell you that, okay, this is something which users were looking and they didn't find. So please document or create something on this. And that's something finding a bit of traction more.
Interesting. Yeah, I wondered how the product will work in terms of accuracy and efficiency when it comes to like a deeply technical product with a lot of nuanced code base to it and a lot of like very specific engineering focused content that only the experts who wrote that kind of a code can actually summarize or write documentation upon, right? Like, so like, for example, even if you talk about like a data tool, like there are many tools like StatSig, Amplitude for product analytics, web analytics, right? A/B testing, experimentation for developing the product in the right direction. So when you use them, you're basically offloading a lot of work from your plate. But still, like on the other side, you will have to consume documentation for these tools. And it depends, like you can have a lot of documentation, which only the creators of these tools might have most handle upon, right? So yeah, I wonder like how accurate would such a software on such kind of tools would be. So have you gotten a lot of success with a lot of very different kinds of tools in different domains?
Right. So I have seen, in fact, if you think of tooling, I would say around content generation, documentation, creation of documents, there are a lot of tools. Next, I would say on support, you do have a lot of chatbots, which can essentially, you provide them your documentation, and from the documentation, they can answer questions.
Mm-hmm.
The piece which is missing, which we focused on, is having a workflow on top of this. That means instead of end user directly interacting with AI, put an expert in the middle, right? Because think of the consequences. Your AI generated a wrong answer or wrong document, right? As it is, that developer is like fighting a fire, and that's why he has come to the forum or the community. And if you mislead or give incorrect information, he'll lose even more time, and then you will lose your credibility, right? That man, you're not helping me, rather you're hurting me, right? So
what is the basis of the ground truth? How does it understand that this piece is wrong? Is it because of the feedback from the questioner or what he's asking, or is it the code that is the ground truth, or a combination?
So at this point in time, one thing which is very clear is hallucination is here to stay. It is not really a defect. It's more like a feature. Okay. Now you can do all the temperature settings, and we tried various things, right? There are certain techniques which you can use to contain them. But I don't think at this point in time, anybody claims that, here is my system which will have 0% or zero hallucination, right? So yes, you start with a vanilla rag, do chunking in the right way, or you can try out, experiment different things, right? You can improve as long as your retrieval and the ranking you're doing as per the, score relevance, as long as that is done properly. Let's say you come to a respectable limit of, let's say, 85%, right? You're 85% accurate. Next, what we experimented and found out is if you can somehow bring in some kind of graph, knowledge graph, where you do not throw your queries to all the like vector data store, all the content, rather you have these entities which filter out on certain criteria. So that contains hallucination by a lot, because mostly bad retrievals are the root cause of hallucination. So if you can just contain bad retrieval or irrelevant retrieval, you would have contained hallucination. But even with graph, what we saw was we could push it to somewhere around 90 or so, 90% accuracy. Next, what we figured out is you should use AI only and only when needed. So if a question has been answered before and that question has been asked again, do not use AI. Just cache that answer. Have a caching layer, right? As long as there is a similarity of, let's say, 97% or more, just replay that answer, right? So that improved overall system performance by, like, let's say, 95%. Beyond that, if you are really interested in improving, there are two other techniques. You can do fine tuning and you can do memory tuning, right? And again, you have to be careful. The challenge with fine tuning is you can teach it or train it, but it will be very hard to untrain or make the system unlearn it. So what we feel is that for technical content or for developer community, I think there is a need to have an expert in the middle. You can keep a channel where you can say, all right, we have an AI bot where things will get automatically answered, but just have that one fine print saying things can be incorrect. In past, we have seen 4% or 5% answers to be incorrect, right? And the reason it is very challenging is it's not 100% English. It is code with a lot of special characters. And in our testing, we have seen this randomly happen where it will pick on some random character and that's it. It'll start dumping some garbage, right? So having a human expert in the middle is what we recommend. But again, you can have a channel where it's autopilot, just come and ask question, AI will answer, and have a feedback mechanism by which you can rectify and then accept the rectified answer. But then do have a human expert who can really control this whole thing. Because our core belief is we can automate this whole support and content and advocacy. But then we strongly feel that you need a human touch at building relationship. Relationship is too important a thing to be left to the bots. So have these AI tools do all the grudge work, right? But have a human being face the real customer and answer to their emotions, right? And make them feel special, make them feel cared.
So what I understand is there's the ground truth is basically the external knowledge base that you're getting for the RAG. So that becomes your ground truth. And then you have like a metric suite on the retrieval and generation side, that RAG's framework or something, on the basis of which you have like some sort of precision recall kind of metrics to evaluate how efficient the system is. So, and then eventually you're doing fine tuning depending upon the amount of data that the person has, or a combination of fine tuning and RAG both.
So the steps that we figured out after a lot of experimentation is that number one is you start with technical documentation. Like that's step one. Step two, if that organization has a community forum, get those question answers in, especially the approved answers. Number three is that there is a lot of tribal knowledge which is sitting there. And that is not in a form where it is very useful. So we help you convert that tribal knowledge, that random conversation into some useful content, mainly FAQs, right? And then take those FAQs from your Slack conversations, right? And then also put it in your RAG, right? Now this on top knowledge graph, on top of that, you have this kind of a caching layer. We call it golden layer. This takes you somewhere around, I would say 95-96% accuracy. And for the last 3-4%, at this point in time, even the best performing model, the best performing systems, you do need that human touch, right? To ensure that it's like really, really helping the company grow, because the ultimate aim is to enable growth.
And
right?
What's the threshold? Like you have to have some initial amount of data, right? Like, so the company should have some sort of active support community at least, where there are like some conversations happening, right? But what's the threshold? How do you calculate if this system is even applicable for that kind of data or not?
Awesome question. So, in fact, I have so many stories to say here. A lot of startups, they get very excited and they come and say, hey, we want to do this. And unfortunately, if you do not have enough technical documentation or community forum data, it's hard to kickstart, right? So what we have found is, let's say RAG is very much dependent on as much document as much you can give me, which you want to publicly others to know. Typically, we have seen around 300 HTML pages is where you have a decent enough corpus to start with, right? And on the Q&A side, it's very hard to come to a number. But in past, we have seen communities which have at least 1,000 Q&A pairs, right? Over there, we start seeing the difference, right? And what we have found again is, there are people who have these free communities on Slack and Discord, and they are having the free tier subscription, right? So they do not have enough historical data, A. B, a lot of their conversations or engagement is very back and forth, where it's very chatty, but very little in knowledge. And the knowledge is hidden somewhere below. It's like in a, let's say, 20-turn conversation, it's the 18th, message which really has the knowledge. The first 15 are just, like, give me this, give me that. And it's very much of a junk, very much of a noise. So cleaning it up and making it really work is a very tedious job. And what we have seen is, if you do not do a good job at cleaning them, they cause hallucination. So many a times Just trying to take your, Slack or Discord conversation and shoving it into your RAG and trying to do retrieval is not a good strategy.
So the cleaning has to be done by the client. Like you are not taking charge of the cleaning for
Correct, because I do not know your technology. You are the expert of your tech, right? All I can give you is a tool by which you decide, like, all right, this is a great information. This is something which should go in our knowledge base. Let me pick this conversation and convert it into either a blog, a FAQ, or whatever, right? Some content. And these
So
are the
how does the data get ingested? Like a lot of people might be wary of like giving you their private conversations with their customers, right? So do you give them this tool as like a black box, as like a service that they can run on their own infrastructure?
Correct. So we give them as a Slack bot or a Discord bot, and we let them pick and choose which conversations they feel are important. Okay. And
so you don't come in the middle.
Correct.
You have no access to the customer, to the
absolutely
clients.
We are completely out. It's between them and what they think is good data, right? All we are saying is that please go in your Slack channels in your enterprise and let your architects, senior engineers, your CTO, your engineering folks convert that tribal knowledge into useful content, right? And then the mechanism that we have is once you create that content and approve it, we automatically feed it in our RAG. So you don't have to do anything. We automatically index it. But we expect you to do that legwork, especially if your company doesn't have enough documentation or enough history, especially for startups or companies with, let's say, less than 100 employees. Right? Because until and unless we have like at least, let's say, 10,000 question answer pair or like at least 500 documentation pages, there is nothing to retrieve from. Right? So we need that raw material. But yes, once your raw material is there, then we operate this engine where we are always in the middle and we very closely follow who is approving the knowledge and how many likes a content is getting. Because that's a signal to us that this is more relevant content. And we keep on updating our backend, giving proper weightage depending on the approvals and the likes. And that's how we ensure that the latest knowledge is served rather than some old stale knowledge.
Great. I think it's 5:25, Deepak, so I'll not keep you for long.
Yeah, last 5 minutes. But there is one cool thing which, again, when I started, I never thought of it, but my customers taught me. And you know what was that? It's a little controversial. There are a lot of communities who do not want to do any lead generation. But then there are companies which came to me and said, hey, can you help me find leads in my community? And we said, yeah, we can do. So what we have started very recently is you can give us your lead filtering criteria. You can tell us that, okay, here's my product. This is the free tier. We want everybody to use support. And then these are my commercial tiers. And these are the leading indicators that, okay, if anybody talks about having a 4-node cluster and looking for the health, ping me. Let me know. I would like my sales guy to have a conversation with this guy. Right? So again, it's a little controversial. As you know, right? Community is not supposed to be where you mine for leads. But then there are some companies who really want this. And this is one way in which they are justifying ROI. I don't know if you want to keep it or not, but that is something we have started providing. Like, okay, give us a criteria and we'll give you the leads.
So you still don't have any information of whoever this person might be asking questions, but just because of the nature of the questions, you gauge something? This is how it works?
Correct. So what we know, if it's a Slack platform, Slack gives you the email address. From the email address, if that person is using the company email address, then we get the company information. But then we feed it into the CRM. You can integrate it into your HubSpot or whatever other platform, intelligence platform you have, sales intelligence platform. Now, the peculiar case of Discord is they do not give you email address. So over there, all we can do is we can tell you that, okay, here is a guy on Discord who was asking this question. Now it's up to you what you want to do, how you want to pursue it.
Makes sense. Yep, great. I think I would love to try that product sometime. And are there like any freemium tiers that you
Yes.
have that you give to the
we
companies?
we do have a freemium offering. You can just go on our website, Doc E.ai, install our Slack bot or Discord bot, right, in your enterprise Slack workspace or your community workspace, and that's it. Just use it. We have a lot of videos integrated into it. Wherever you are in doubt, just go to the How To tab and it'll explain you how to use the product.
Great. Yep. Great. I think a lot of DevRel folks will be excited to use something like that to ease their workload, and get some more insights. I mean, it's hard to get insights, especially if somebody has a big community and they want to make use of your lead generation or lead finding plugin or tool, whatever you call it. And then also on the other side, with such big platforms and ecosystems, they usually have a lot of conversations and a lot of data with a lot of documentation. So I think it could be extremely relevant. But yeah, it was great chatting with you, Deepak. I loved every bit of it and really respect how much effort you have put into all these conversations with more than 100 folks in this community of developer relations.
Awesome. By the way, you were one among them, Ankit.
Oh yeah, we did record a conversation. Great, Deepak. I'll
Awesome. Great, Ankit.
chat with you again soon. Great. Thanks for coming.